The fluorescent lights of Denny's cast their familiar harsh glow across the red vinyl booths, as Sarah Martinez carefully counted the bills in her wallet, making sure she had enough for dinner and a small tip. It was 8:30 p.m. on a Friday night, and Sarah was treating her two young children to their monthly dinner out. A small luxury that required careful budgeting, but was worth every penny to see the joy on their faces. At 28 years old, Sarah was a single mother working 2 jobs to support her 7-year-old daughter Emma and 5-year-old son Lucas. By day, she worked as a medical receptionist at a busy clinic. 3 nights a week she cleaned offices downtown, often not getting home until after midnight. It was exhausting, but Sarah was determined to provide for her children and build a better life for them. The Denny's on Mill Avenue had become their special place. It was affordable, kid-friendly, and the waitresses had gotten to know them over the past year. Emma always ordered the same thing: pancakes with extra syrup, while Lucas preferred chicken strips and fries. For Sarah, these dinners represented more than just food. They were precious moments of normalcy in an otherwise chaotic life. What Sarah didn't know was that she was about to encounter the kind of men who viewed a woman alone with children as an opportunity for entertainment, harassment, and worse. And what those men didn't know was that Sarah was not as alone as she appeared. Seated in a corner booth were 4 men in their early 30s who had been drinking heavily since happy hour ended 3 hours earlier. They had started at a sports bar, moved to a strip club, and finally ended up at Denny's when everywhere else kicked them out for being too drunk and disruptive. The leader of the group was Brad Hutchinson, a construction foreman with a history of domestic violence and a belief that his physical size gave him the right to intimidate anyone he wanted. Brad was the kind of man who became aggressive when he drank, and tonight he had drunk far more than usual. With Brad were his regular drinking buddies: Mike Torres, a mechanic who lost his license due to multiple duels; Jason Riley, an unemployed former security guard with anger management issues; and Danny Walsh, a warehouse worker who filmed most of Warehouse, their adventures for social media. "Check out the MILF at table 6, Brad said loudly enough for nearby diners to hear, his words slurred from alcohol. "She looks like she could use some company." Mike laughed, spilling beer on the table. "Yeah, and look at those kids. Bet Daddy ran off when things got tough." "I bet she's lonely," Jason added, his eyes fixed on Sarah with predatory interest. "Maybe we should go introduce ourselves." Danny pulled out his phone. This could be good content. Single mom, kids present, bunch of drunk guys offering to help her out. The internet loves this stuff. Sarah was completely unaware of the attention she was receiving. She was focused on helping Lucas cut his chicken strips and making sure Emma didn't spill syrup on her school clothes. These dinner outings were carefully planned around her work schedule, and she wanted everything to be perfect. "Mommy," Emma said, looking up from her pancakes, "can we get ice cream after dinner?" Sarah smiled, though she had already calculated that ice cream would stretch their budget too thin. "We'll see, sweetie. Let's finish dinner first." Lucas, always the more observant of her 2 children, had noticed the men at the corner booth and the way they were looking at their table. "Mommy," he whispered, "those men are staring at us." Sarah glanced over discreetly and saw the 4 men, their body language aggressive and their attention clearly focused on her table. She had learned to recognize potential threats during her years as a single mother, and everything about these men screamed danger. "Just ignore them, baby," she told Lucas quietly. "We'll be leaving soon," but the men had no intention of being ignored. Brad stood up unsteadily and began walking toward their table, his friends following behind like a pack of wolves. "Excuse me, miss," Brad said as he approached, his voice loud enough to draw the attention of other diners. "Mind if we join you? Looks like you could use some adult company." Sarah looked up at him with the wariness of someone who had dealt with unwanted male attention before. "No thank you," she said politely, but firmly. "We're having a family dinner." Brad laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. Family dinner? Where's Daddy? Did he run off when he realized what he got himself into? The words stung because they weren't entirely wrong. Emma's father had indeed disappeared when Sarah got pregnant, leaving her to face parenthood alone. But she had built a good life for herself and her children, and she wasn't about to let some drunk stranger make her feel ashamed of it. "Please leave us alone," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the fear building inside her. "We just want to enjoy our dinner." Mike slid into the booth across from her without being invited, his alcohol-soaked breath making Emma scrunch up her nose in disgust. "Come on, don't be like that," Mike said with a predatory smile. "We're just trying to be friendly. Single mom like you probably gets lonely sometimes." Jason took the seat next to Mike, effectively trapping Sarah and her children in the booth. Danny positioned himself at the end of the table, his phone discreetly recording the encounter. "Guys, seriously," Sarah said, her voice taking on an edge of desperation. "My children are here. Please just leave us alone." "Your children need to see what a real man looks like," Brad said, squeezing into the booth next to Sarah despite her obvious discomfort. "Maybe learn some respect." Emma began to cry, overwhelmed by the strange men and their threatening behavior. Lucas moved closer to his mother, his small hand reaching for hers. "Mommy, I want to go home," Emma whimpered. "Oh, look at that," Jason mocked. Little princess is scared. Maybe she needs a new daddy to toughen her up." The word sent a chill down Sarah's spine. These men weren't just drunk and obnoxious, they were dangerous. She needed to get her children out of there, but they were trapped in the booth with no clear escape route. "Listen," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice calm for her children's sake. "I have money. If you want money, I'll give you what I have. Just please, let us leave." Brad laughed again. "We don't want your money, sweetheart. We want something else entirely." He placed his hand on Sarah's shoulder, his grip firm enough to be threatening but not quite violent enough to clearly cross the line into assault. It was the kind of intimidation that predators had perfected, technically legal but unmistakably menacing. What none of them knew was that Sarah was not as alone as she appeared. For the past 6 months, she had been dating Marcus Steele Johnson, a member of the Phoenix chapter of the Hells Angels. Marcus was currently serving a short stint in county jail for a minor parole violation, but his absence didn't mean Sarah was without protection. Before Marcus went away, he had given Sarah a special phone with direct access to his club brothers. "If anyone ever bothers you or the kids," he had told her, "you press this button and help will come. No questions asked." While the men were focused on intimidating her, Sarah discreetly reached into her purse and found the phone. With trembling fingers, she pressed the emergency button that would send an immediate alert to every member of the Phoenix chapter. Miles away, at the clubhouse, the alert went off like a fire alarm. Within seconds, every phone in the building was buzzing with the same message. Steele's family in trouble. Denny's on Mill Avenue. Code red. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Tommy Road Dog Chen was the first to read the message, and he immediately called out to the dozen other members who were hanging out at the clubhouse. "Church! Now! Steele's family is in trouble." Carl Savage Morrison, the chapter president, was in his office reviewing club business. When he heard the commotion, he burst through the door to find his brothers already grabbing their leather vests and heading for their bikes. "What's the situation?" Savage demanded. "Emergency alert from Steele's phone," Road Dog explained quickly. "His girl and kids are in trouble at Denny's." Savage nodded grimly. Steele was serving time for a parole violation that should have been handled with a fine, but a vindictive parole officer had decided to make an example of him. The club had been keeping an eye on Sarah and the children in his absence, and any threat to them was a threat to the entire brotherhood. "Every brother who can ride, rides now," Savage commanded. This is family. The sound of motorcycle engines starting up filled the night air as over 20 Harleys roared to life simultaneously. These weren't weekend warriors or posers. These were real outlaws, men who had earned their colors through loyalty, courage, and an unbreakable code that put family above everything else. Back at Denny's, the situation was escalating rapidly. Brad had moved closer to Sarah, his hand now resting on her thigh despite her obvious discomfort and repeated requests for him to stop. "Come on, baby," Brad slurred. "Just relax. We're all friends here." Emma was crying harder now, and Lucas was trying to comfort his sister while staying close to his mother. The other diners in the restaurant had noticed the commotion, but like so often happens in these situations, no one wanted to get involved. Mike had ordered another round of drinks for the table without asking Sarah, effectively claiming their booth as his group's territory. "You know what?" Mike said, his voice getting louder and more aggressive. "I think you and the kids should come party with us. We know how to show a lady a good time." "No," Sarah said firmly, her maternal instincts overriding her fear. "We're leaving now." She tried to stand up, but Brad grabbed her wrist and pulled her back down. "I don't think so, sweetheart. The night's still young, and we haven't finished getting to know each other yet." That was when they heard it. A sound that started as a distant rumble, but quickly grew into something much more ominous. The unmistakable roar of motorcycle engines, many of them, all heading in the same direction. Through the large windows that faced the parking lot, the drunk men could see lights approaching from multiple directions. Headlights and taillights creating streams of light through the darkness, all converging on the Denny's. "What the hell is that noise?" Danny asked nervously, lowering his phone for the first time since the encounter began. The sound grew louder and louder until it seemed to shake the building itself. Then the first motorcycle appeared in the parking lot, followed by another, and another, until the entire lot was filled with Harleys and their leather-clad riders. The bikers sat motionless on their machines for a moment, their faces hidden behind dark visors, like something out of a nightmare. Then, as if responding to some unspoken signal, they began dismounting and walking toward the restaurant entrance. Brad, still drunk but sobering up quickly, looked around nervously. Probably just some weekend warriors stopping for coffee. But Sarah knew better. She recognized several of the bikes and their riders from the time she had spent at the clubhouse with Marcus. These were his brothers, and they had come for her. The first wave of Hell's Angels entered the restaurant with the quiet confidence of men who were used to commanding respect wherever they went. Savage led the group, his imposing presence immediately drawing the attention of everyone in the building. Road Dogg, Iron Horse, Bear, Diesel, and a dozen others followed, their boots echoing on the tile floor as they scanned the restaurant until their eyes found Sarah and her children trapped in the booth with the 4 drunk men. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees as the bikers assessed the situation. They could see Sarah's fear, her children's tears, and the obvious distress of the family they had sworn to protect. Savage approached the booth slowly, his eyes fixed on Brad with the kind of intensity usually reserved for mortal enemies. "Gentlemen," Savage said quietly, his voice carrying despite its low volume, "I think you have something that belongs to us." Brad, his alcohol-clouded judgment still intact enough to recognize danger when he saw it, tried to maintain his bravado. "Look, old man, we were here first. Find your own table." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Every biker in the restaurant went completely still, their attention focused on the man who had just disrespected their president in front of their family. Bear, whose nickname accurately described both his size and temperament, took a step closer to the booth. "Son," Bear said slowly, "you just made the biggest mistake of your life." Road Dogg moved to the other side of the booth, effectively cutting off any escape route the drunk men might have been considering. "Sarah," Road Dogg said gently, "are you and the kids okay?" Sarah nodded, tears of relief streaming down her face. They wouldn't let us leave. They kept touching me even when I asked them to stop. Iron Horse, whose injuries from a recent accident made his approach even more intimidating, leaned down to look the four men in the eye. "Is that true?" Iron Horse asked quietly. "You boys been putting your hands on Steel-S woman without permission?" Mike, finally beginning to understand the gravity of their situation, tried to backtrack. "Look, we were just being friendly. No harm done, no harm done." Diesel stepped forward, his voice filled with controlled rage. "You terrorized 2 children and assaulted their mother. That's your definition of no harm?" Jason looked around at the growing number of bikers surrounding their table and realized they were completely outnumbered and outmatched. "We didn't know she had a boyfriend," Jason said weakly. "If we had known, you wouldn't have done it," Savage interrupted. "So you only abuse women who you think are unprotected? That makes it worse, not better." Denny, who had been recording the entire encounter, tried to discreetly put his phone away, but Prophet caught the movement. "Son," Prophet said, extending his hand, "he'll take that phone. Now." Danny hesitated for a moment, but the sight of 20 angry bikers convinced him to comply. He handed over his phone, which Prophet immediately deleted the footage before pocketing the device. "Sarah," Savage said, turning his attention to the woman they had come to protect, "why don't you and the kids move to that booth over there while we have a conversation with these gentlemen?" Sarah nodded gratefully, gathering her children and their belongings. Emma and Lucas clung to her as they moved to safety, finally able to breathe freely for the first time since the ordeal began. Once Sarah and her children were safely away from the confrontation, Savage turned his full attention back to the 4 drunk men, who were now completely surrounded by members of the most dangerous motorcycle club in America. "Now," Savage said, his voice taking on a tone that suggested the real conversation was just beginning, "let's talk about respect." Brad, still drunk enough to be stupid, made one last attempt at defiance. "You can't do anything to us here. This is a public place. There are witnesses." Bear laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Son, do you see anyone in this restaurant who looks like they're going to help you? Do you see anyone who wants to get involved in this situation?" Brad looked around and realized that the other diners had either left or moved as far away as possible from the confrontation. Even the restaurant staff had retreated to the kitchen, leaving the dining room to the bikers and their business. "Here is what's going to happen," Diesel said, pulling out his wallet. "You're going to pay for this family's dinner. You're going to tip the waitress generously for the trouble you've caused, and then you're going to walk out of here and never bother them again. And there's something else," Iron Horse added. "You see that woman over there? She's under our protection now. If we ever hear about any of you bothering her or any other woman, we'll have this conversation again. And next time, it won't be in a public place." Road Dogg stepped closer to Mike, whose face had gone pale as the reality of their situation sank in. "You boys like to pick on women and children when you think they're defenseless," Road Dogg said quietly. "But you picked the wrong family to mess with tonight." The 4 men looked around at the sea of leather and denim surrounding them. Men who looked like they had stepped out of their worst nightmares. They were completely trapped, with no escape routes and no help coming. One by one, they reached for their wallets, their hands shaking as they counted out money for the bill and tip. The arrogance and aggression they had displayed just minutes before had completely evaporated, replaced by fear and the desperate desire to escape the situation they had created. "We're sorry," Brad mumbled, no longer making eye contact with any of the bikers. "We didn't mean any harm." "You meant exactly the harm you caused," Savage replied coldly. "The only reason you're walking out of here is because we don't want those children to see violence. But make no mistake, if you ever cross our path again, the outcome will be very different." The 4 men stood up from the booth, their movements awkward and hurried. They practically ran for the exit, pushing past the wall of bikers who parted just enough to let them through. As they stumbled into the parking lot, the sight of 20-plus motorcycles arranged in perfect formation drove home the reality of just how close they had come to serious trouble. Sarah approached Savage with Emma and Lucas clinging to her sides. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come." "You don't need to thank us," Savage replied gently. "Steele is our brother. That makes you family. And we take care of family." Bear kneeled down to Emma and Lucas level, his intimidating appearance softening as he spoke to the children. "Hey there, little ones," he said kindly. "Are you okay? Those mean men didn't hurt you, did they?" Emma shook her head, though she was still stifling from the tears she had shed earlier. "They were scary," Lucas said honestly, "but you're scarier than them." Bear laughed, and this time there was genuine warmth in the sound. "That's right, buddy. Buddy, and as long as we're around, nobody scary is going to bother you or your mom ever again." Road Dogg approached with the phone Danny had been using to record the encounter. "Sarah," he said, "Steele asked us to give you this when he went away. From now on, don't hesitate to use it. Day or night, if you need help, you call us." Iron Horse pulled out a business card and handed it to Sarah. "This has my number on it," he explained. "Store it in your regular phone, too. And if anyone ever bothers you again, anyone at all, you call immediately. We don't care what time it is or what we're doing. Family comes first." As the bikers began to filter out of the restaurant, each one stopped to check on Sarah and the children. Some shared stories about their own families. Others offered practical help like babysitting or rides to work if her car ever broke down. The waitress, who had been hiding in the kitchen during the confrontation, cautiously approached the table. "Ma'am," she said to Sarah, "your dinner tonight is on the house. And from now on, anytime you come in here, we want you to know you're safe. We'll keep an eye out for you." Savage was the last to leave, and he spent a few minutes talking privately with Sarah about security measures and emergency procedures. "Steele will be out in 2 weeks," he told her. "Until then, consider yourself to have 20 brothers watching over you." As the motorcycles roared to life in the parking lot, their engines creating a symphony of mechanical power, Sarah felt a sense of safety and belonging she hadn't experienced since her relationship with Marcus began. The story of what happened at Denny's that night spread quickly through the community. The 4 men who had harassed Sarah were identified through social media and faced consequences beyond just the humiliation they experienced that night. Brad lost his job when his employer learned about the incident. Mike had his parole revoked due to his drinking and aggressive behavior. Jason was arrested on outstanding warrants when police investigated the incident. Danny found his social media accounts flooded with criticism and condemnation from people who had heard about his role in filming the harassment. More importantly, the incident sent a clear message throughout the community that certain behaviors would not be tolerated. The Denny's on Mill Avenue became known as a safe space for women and families, where harassment would be met with swift and decisive consequences. Sarah continued her relationship with Marcus when he was released from jail, and eventually they married in a ceremony attended by the entire Phoenix chapter. Emma and Lucas grew up with a dozen uncles who taught them about loyalty, respect, and the importance of protecting those who cannot protect themselves. The 4 drunk men never bothered another woman in public again. Some say they moved to other states. Others claim they spent the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders, waiting for the rumble of motorcycle engines that would signal their past had caught up with them. Because in the world of those who live by the code of brotherhood, family extends beyond blood relations. Respect for women and children is non-negotiable, and justice sometimes fills an entire parking lot with Harleys, ready to defend those who, cars, cannot defend themselves. The lesson was simple but powerful. Real men protect the innocent. Real strength stands up to bullies. And sometimes the family you choose is stronger than any biological connection. And sometimes, when you're facing your darkest moment, help comes roaring down the highway with engines that sound like thunder and hearts that beat with the rhythm of justice.